So, we have a bunch of worksheets, a couple of worksheets, which you can fill out. And we would like you guys to actually start filling out these things here. Obviously, the time to fill them out will be made less over the course of the afternoon. But, sorry, also give you guys some pens to do that. At the back of that, though, they also have an investment note. There's kind of a couple of tables of a bunch of investment. Yeah, like it's.
Okay. So let's start. Hey, thanks for coming. First of all, thank you for taking time out of your very busy work schedule. I appreciate it. My name is Femi Awoni, and today, in Spirit of Taking Control, we're going to be talking about how to take control of your finances. Now, in today's presentation, I'm going to be introducing what it means to take control of your finances. We're going to be talking about how to get a grasp. We're going to be talking about how to keep your money in direction, and then concluding to answer any questions that you have. So if you have any questions, please note them down, and at the end of the presentation, I'll be happy to answer. Okay, so just jump right in. What does it mean to take control of your finances? So taking control of your finances means gaining power over your current financial situation and then directing your money where you like it to go. So taking control of your finances is a two-step process. The first part is getting a full grasp of your current financial standing. And the second part involves setting financial goals to be able to your money direction. So how do you get a full grasp of your current financial standing? Well, to get a grasp of your current financial standing, you have to get a very clear picture of exactly where you are right now financially. And you do that using a very simple tool called budgeting. Now, budgeting has a few negative connotations. It comes with much of a worse skill. So what we're going to do now is a little bit of an experiment. And what I want you to do, please raise your hands. Just hands up. Thank you. I'm going to run a few definitions by you here, and the one that resonates with you most, put your hands down. Okay. So, what does budgeting mean to you? Budgeting is a way to ensure you live a life of hardship. No?
What is schedule?
Kind of. Okay, let's get to the next one. Budgeting is a way to kill off your Christmas.
Yes.
Okay, then the last one, budgeting is a way to identify where you need to go. Okay, that's good. Yeah. So.
That's the last one.
Okay, but the thing is, budgeting, the definition I want to go with is simply the budgeting is a way to identify exactly where you need to go. It's keyword, I put awareness there, because the concept of budgeting and the keyword is being aware of how much comes in and how much goes out. That's the basic concept of budgeting. So budgeting helps you get a grasp of current financial situation in three simple ways. And this is where the first worksheet comes into play. The first two steps are actually illustrated in the worksheet, and we'll be going through them sequentially. So the first one is outlining, which helps you get a grasp of the current financial situation by helping you outline income. Now, let me use an example. There's a girl called Kemi. She's a lawyer. She earns 100,000 naira every month. Now, if that's all Kemi earns, her total monthly income is 100,000 naira. So on this start, she's right-handed people. So if you know what your current financial monthly income is, just write your first. Some people are hiding it. But yeah, so if Kemi is only income is 100, so that's where you can understand. But let's say Kemi is freelance such as side hustles and entrepreneur. What you do here is get an estimate. So she can get an estimate of the last 3 months, income of the last 3 months divided by 3. Or if 3 months is not enough, last 6 months then divided by 6. The goal here is to get an estimate of the monthly income. Then after that, so if you're working through this worksheet, you would then be going through from the monthly income part, the next part is the expenses. Now, expenses is categorized in 3. The first one is fixed needs. The second one is variable needs. The third one is wants. Fixed needs include things like your rent, the things you need to survive, and they're fixed. Variable needs include things like fuel, groceries, for instance. You need to eat, you need to go around, but how much you spend on fuel and groceries varies from month to month. And the last one is wants. Now, wants include things like what you guys are probably going to do after this, going out for rocks, buying gifts with friends, eating out, things like that. So that basically these are the 3 categories of expenses. Now, if you look at the worksheets, as you go along, they go from fixed to variable to want, row by row, basically. So you don't have to do it now because you probably need either a bank statement to accurately write down your expenses, or if you want, another way you can do it is for the next month, just note down your expenses. An app you can use is Budget or Spendy, literally as you Monzo. Yeah. So as you go along the month, every time you spend money, just note it down. Yeah, so this will help you guide your thinking as you go through the month and get your total monthly expenses. Monthly income. So if you have questions, it's you can. Total monthly income, then total monthly expenses. You do total income minus total expenses to get your available funds. Now, this is where it gets tricky. If you do this and your available funds is positive, then it means you're in the green, you're doing good. The goal here is to increase this amount as much as possible. But if you do it and it is unfortunately the red is negative, it's very likely that you're living from paycheck to paycheck. But then the goal here is to take proactive steps to cut down your expenses to make sure that you have available funds which can then give directions. So you can see the flow of the logic now. So if you want to cut down your expenses, for instance, under once, instead of going out for lunch, doing your work hours, you can pack lunch from home so that you can save money on lunch. And you can place a cap, for instance, on the amount of times that you go for rocks, just to make sure that you're staying within what you can actually afford. Then if you've cut down your wants as much as humanly possible, can't go any further. Wants towards the real needs. So you need to go out for fuel. Go out, you need to fuel your movement. Or how many places do you need to go? You know what I'm saying? So if you place a cap, you become very effective and efficient with how many places you're actually going, making sure that wherever you're going is making money or is productive or something. Another example is groceries. You need to buy food and groceries to survive, but you need to buy expensive groceries. There are surely cheaper alternatives that you can use. So you can then take these steps to cut down your expenses so that they fit within the income that you have, and you can then have available funds. So let's say you do have available funds. You have a sizable amount, you've done well. What do you do with it? How do you know how to give it direction? And well, there are 2 ways that you give your money direction. The first one is by saving, and the second one is by investing. Now, saving and investing is all well and good, but before you save and invest, there's one major thing they need, and that thing is financial goals. Without a goal or a target in mind, saving and investing will work. You won't be consistent, you'll be able to do it for a long period of time. You'll fall through the cracks after a certain amount of time. So financial goals is the first principle. Well, okay, so now I wanted to actually do a little experience for me. If you go through the second slide, you'll see the financial goal sheet. What I wanted to do is for 2018, I want you to actually tell me, or tell yourself, what your financial goals are. So, but you're not going to be able to just set financial goals. They have to be smart, meaning specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Now, I'll go through an example. Let's say Kemi, that we mentioned earlier. If Kemi wants to travel next year, she shouldn't just stop there and travel. She has to say, okay, where exactly do you want to travel to? So in this example, I used to buy. So I want to travel to Dubai. Now, that's a specific goal. From there, we move to the measurable. How much is it going to cost to go to Dubai? Excuse me. How much is accommodation? How much is transportation? She needs to get a target number, because once you start putting figures to your goals, it never becomes real. So how can I actually realistically move to this? That then builds up to the second one, achievable goals. So how much can I consistently set aside to make sure that I achieve this goal within the time frame? We'll talk more about this in the next few slides, but it's important that you keep this in mind. Your goals need to be achievable for them to be, for you to be able to accomplish them. Then the next one is relevant. Now, this relevant one isn't something that a lot of people have. People sometimes set financial goals because of peer pressure, to match their friends' goals or to match what their parents want for them. But these goals need to be personal to you, because human beings are innately motivated by personal incentive. You will not be consistent if it's not something you actually want to do. I'm sure you can resonate with this when your friends want to do something and it's not really what you want to do. You're not going to do it wholeheartedly. But if you want to actually accomplish your financial goals, it has to be something that you really want to do. For instance, I want to travel to Dubai to celebrate a personal milestone in my life. When I get married or whatever. Do you understand? Like, if you want to travel to England, I want to go to England because Nigeria is hard. I can't come and die. You get it? Like, you have to say your goals have to be personal. You know what I'm saying? Then the last one is time bound. So it's not good enough to just set these goals. You have to put a target in terms of time. When do you want to achieve this goal? So if you want that 6 months, so put 6 months there. If you want to go to Dubai in 3 years, 3 years. So then you now have a way to work towards your goal in terms of how much can I put aside to accomplish it in so amount of time. Okay, so let's say you've done all this and you've actually written your financial goals down. I see some of you are quite busy. But once you've done all this, the next thing is you can then begin to either save or begin to invest. So let's start with saving. So what should you save? This is a question a lot of people have. They don't know exactly what their savings rate should be. So what I'll do is, there's this rule called the 50-30-20 rule. It was made by Elizabeth Warren. She's a US senator, and what she did is basically, it's a very simple rule. Let's use Canadian, just for reference. Kemi has 100K. According to the 50-30-20 rule, Kemi should save dedicates 50% of her income towards her needs. So things like rent, groceries, and things she needs to buy, 50% of her income should go towards that. Then 30% should go towards her wants, her rocks, eating out, and buying gifts to friends, whatnot. That should go towards what? Then 20%, which here with 20K, should be saved. Now that's what the 50-30-20 rule dictates. Now for some people, this might not be realistic. This is just a starting point, so the marker for you to at least use in your head. For some people, they might not be able to afford 20%, especially if their needs are too high. So what they can do is go down to 15, 10, and 12, but try not to go below 10 as much as possible, because the goal here is to increase and go as high as you possibly can. So yeah, that's for personal goals. Now for security goals, and personal goals include things like buying a car, buying a house. So this is basically things that are personal to you, but not necessarily for security reasons. For security reasons, what you need is an emergency fund. Now, who here knows what an emergency fund is? Any ideas? What does it mean to you, an emergency fund?
Where you save money in case of an emergency.
It's very self-explanatory. It doesn't, but the rule of thumb is that this emergency fund should be 3 to 6 months of income. Now, for some people, they say it should be your expenses, but we try to tell people not to do the expenses, because if you're saving for your expenses, you're only accounting for predictable situations. Like, okay, all things being equal, I will need to spend this on another day, I need to pay rent, I need to buy groceries, but if an emergency arises, you're thrown out of the market. If you save for your income, you can then realistically build for the future. It's an emergency. So that's once you, in order to decide how many months you should save for, because it's 3 to 6 months, it could be 3, it could be 4, 5, or 6. One of our founders, Freddie, do you come from me? This is called Freddie's Emergency Fund Framework. Spent a lot of time thinking about this. Pondered, thought about this for a long time, and he came up with what's called Freddie's Emergency Fund Framework. If you turn the worksheets, you see something called an emergency fund. So what this is a series of 4 simple questions. And after you've answered 4 questions, what you would have is a total amount that will help you decide how big your emergency fund should be. So 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, or 6 months. You can answer this at home, but I just want you to have it in mind when you go forward. Then once you've decided how big your emergency fund should be, you can then apply the 50-30 rule that we spoke about earlier. Now, where should you save? This is interesting because a lot of people don't actually know what I'm about to tell you, so just try and pay attention. For personal goals, if you're saving towards a house, if you're saving towards a car, you want to try and make this as hard to reach as possible because it's so easy to deviate and spend this money because it's money that continues. But if you want to actually reach this goal, try your best to move this away from anywhere that you can easily reach. So like a fixed debt account or an account that doesn't have a card that is easily accessible. So by creating the extra stress of having to go to your bank is basically an inhibiting factor basically for you to make sure that you can save to it. But if it's an emergency fund, you have to try and make this as accessible as possible because an emergency can happen at any time. So I'll give you an example. If I am building an emergency fund and I keep it in a fixed debt account, I need to go to the bank to actually touch this money. But the problem here is if I have an accident today, for instance, I can't go to the bank. I can't pay, and if I don't have enough money on me, I won't have access to my emergency fund. So it's important that this is as easily accessible for you as possible. So what this means is basically either a checking or savings account with a card that you can easily access and just move on. Then how should you save? The thing is, if you take nothing else from this today, please note these 2 things down because these are the 2 things that will probably help you actually begin to take steps to actually save. Now, how many times have you tried to save by saying, you know what, I'll see how much I can save at the end of the month, you just have nothing left. I mean, surely you guys can relate to that. So this is where we want to bring in the concept of paying yourself first. So after you've gone through the worksheet and decided how much you actually want to save, let's say you decide on 20%, what you have to do here is start saving that 20% first. So you immediately get money. The second the money enters your account, take that 20% and move it into your savings account. That way, whatever you have left, you do what you want. Like, go for it, spend it. I mean, when you're broke, you know what I'm saying? Like, once you spend the money, once you've separated the money, you're free to then do whatever you want with the rest because you've taken care of your future self first. Now, this in itself isn't easy. It's actually easier said than done. For instance, there's some months that the bills have really accumulated and you're just thinking, do I really want to pay this money? Yeah, but the way to do it is take it outside of yourself. So you automate the process. So you can do this by writing a standing order. For instance, at a bank, you go to the bank, tell your bank manager, let's say you get paid every 25th, on the 25th of every month. You say, you know what, on the 27th or 28th, I want this money sent to this account without my notice. This way, you're basically forced to save. You understand what I'm saying? Like you're basically you're taking the process outside of yourself and you're taking care of yourself regardless of your current what's going on in your life at the moment. So these 2 factors, pay yourself first and automate the process. I actually want to get to try your very best to take practice to exercise these things because they'll change your life. Yes, that's saving. The next one is investing. Now, why should you invest? The fundamental reason why anyone invests in is to increase their earning potential. And an example is using the power of compounding. Example here. I invest in a money market fund, ARM investors. I started with a simple amount of 15K. Every month I have 15K to it. Just without my notice is an automatic process. In 30 years, the amount, without interest, the amount I will have accumulated in that account is 5.4 million. But with the power of compounding, I would have had a total of 80 million in 30 years. And the reason why is because not only is the money compound, the power of compounding is basically generating money on the interest you earn. So let's say you have, mine is 15% interest. If I invest 100K, at the end of the year, I have 115K. That 115K then generates another 15% interest, then gets the amount, it continues generating interest as you go along. The concept is, the idea here is you're not taking your interest earnings out. You're just leaving it to compound. So this is basically where the power of investing comes into play. When you want to build wealth, increase earning potential using the power of compounding. Now, what should you save? What should you invest? Sorry. Now, the first thing is it depends on you. For instance, there's some, if you invest in something like a money market, your investment is safe, your initial principal is safe. So it's if you want some short-term goals, let's say in a year, and want to increase your earning potential to, let's say, buy a car, for instance, you can go for this. But if your investment is so much riskier, you can't aim for short-term goals. Your objective has to be long-term for you to invest in something like stocks. You know what I'm saying? Because the volatility is very, very low. If you invest in something short-term, when you want the money, it will be gone. But if you invest in something, if you want a long-term earnings, stocks basically help you out because the volatility cancels itself out. So basically, it depends on your investment objectives. The thing is, we are not licensed to tell you exactly what you should invest in. I want to make this very clear. Don't you? What we can do is give you the baseline understanding information that you need to guide your investment decisions. So if you look at your handsheets and the handouts, what we've done is we've provided you with an investment log. The investment log is basically 4 investment firms, the various investments that the investment practices they have, and the goals or objectives that match the various investments. So if you're interested in one of these firms, all you have to do is basically look through them, see which one matches you, then either call them or pay them a visit, and they'll be able to guide you. Now, when you actually go to visit them, we also help you out with investment questions, which are back and they're after the investment log. These are some questions that you can actually ask the investment manager to make sure that you're getting your values work. So that's basically it. But then, just to help you start your journey, another thing that you need to know to even begin investing is your risk tolerance. So here we outline 3 things: adventurous, balanced, and cautious. Now, adventurous means risk low. So if you're a little you want a little bit of risk and you want a high reward that's associated with it. For instance, Bitcoin is one. You're probably towards your risk tolerance is probably towards the adventurous side. If you're more balanced, you're not overly risky or overly conservative. You're more in the middle. I'm one of these, by the way. You're more balanced. Then the third one is cautious. Now, cautious people tend to be very risk averse. They don't want to lose money. I'm not even trying. I know one personally standing right there. This is right there. I'm trying to lose any money. So these are basically the kinds of things that you need. So for you, need to, when you go to the investment manager, he will guide you, or he or she, sorry, will guide you through your risk tolerance to help you know where you are. Those things that you need to know. Another thing is the asset classes and asset allocation. Later on, when you're going through the various investment logs, the investment companies out there, you'll see that under asset allocation, we showed a percentage that goes towards either bonds or stocks and whatnot. Based on your tolerance to risk, they will either match you with a percentage amount of risk investments, a percentage amount of risk, low risk investments, just to make sure that the allocation matches your risk tolerance. But just to go through these bonds are things like government bonds, where the government is basically saying, borrow us money at a time. These are typically very low risk. Typically, stocks tend to be higher risk depending on how stable the company is. Because you can buy stocks in the company on General Stock Exchange. Private equity is where you either buy out someone that already has shareholdings, or invest in a startup like Dailykobo. Then there's real estate. As you can see, there are a lot of constructions in Lagos right now. If you invest in real estate, for instance, you can buy property now. You sell it for a higher price and you get profits. So basically, these are the various types of asset classes and allocations that we can provide for you in various investment firms. Now, how should you invest? I used the earlier example of a mutual fund. If you invest in a mutual fund and you want to build wealth for the future, I would advise again paying yourself first. Because, okay, I'll give myself an example. For my personal goals, like buying a house or car, I use a mutual fund. For security reasons, I save the money in an account that I can save. In a mutual fund, I can't readily touch the money because I have to go to the bank and go to the investment and tell the rest of the money. It's very long. That way, it helps me build wealth towards the future. And a money market fund is very secure, which matches my tolerance for risk. So if you're investing in a mutual fund, I'd advise that you pay yourself first and automate the process. And automate the process as well as you can. So that's basically it. Just to recap. Today we've spoken about what it means to take control of your finances. We've spoken about how to get a grasp of your current financial situation by budgeting. We've spoken about how to give your money direction by saving and investing. Now, these are some 4 things that you should always remember. It's important that you clear off your debts and build an emergency fund. If you have any debts, it is advisable that you clear this off as soon as possible, and you should always start with the highest interest first. The one that is not the one that is the largest amount. The one that has the highest interest should be cleared off first. Then you move down to the interest payments, basically. And always try to build an emergency fund because I'm sure you notice life in Lagos is very, very dangerous. Anything can happen. Yeah, so you need to try your very best to build an emergency fund. Now, the thing is, always pay yourself first, like you said earlier. Try your very best to pay yourself first because this is. When I heard this and I started practicing this, I can't stress how big of a change it was for me because I genuinely couldn't say it before. I've been doing this for about a year now, and it is a life changer. Try your very best. Pay yourself first and automate the process. Then this one is don't beat yourself up if you fall short. Now the thing is, a lot of people when they try to save and they don't make their savings, that month is gone. They spend anything they want. You know what I'm saying? They basically throw it out the window. The thing is, don't beat yourself up. If you don't make your targets, it's cool. Just reassess the situation and try your very best to build from there. So if you don't make your targets, don't be too harsh on yourself. We're all human beings. We all fall short sometimes. Try to reassess the situation. Don't just throw the entire rule book out the window. Then when it gets peaky again, that's not again. So don't be yourself. And the last thing is personal finance is 20% knowledge, 80% discipline. It's a quote by one of my mentors, Dave Ramsey. And it's a fact. So everything I've told you here is 20% of what personal finance has to offer. But 80% is your personal discipline. So if you don't want to save, you won't save. If you're not disciplined or determined to actually meet your investment goals, you will not meet them. So it's important that you try your very best to make dedicated efforts, like strong dedicated efforts to make sure that you build towards your personal financial goals. One of our speakers, Marwa, is at the back there. He's going to be talking about the discipline aspects and the habits aspect of today. So when it comes up, we'll see what he has to say. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions? Ray, you had a few there.
So for the emergency fund, how do you come up with like exact? I know you know you can answer it, but how would you come up with your emergency fund?
So that's what the Freddie emergency fund was for. To
Oh,
see.
yeah, I think I
No, I think it came out and then. So basically the framework will tell you whether it's 3 months you should save it, or 4 months, or 5 months, or 6 months. Once you've determined that amount, you can then begin to say how much can I realistically put to it every month. Any other questions?
Yeah. So you said you invest in more of the money market.
Yeah, money market.
How easy is it to find information on companies and type of things you want to invest in?
It's better than it was before. It's still quite hard. Because when we're sourcing for the information for the investment law, it was quite a hassle. Partly because of traffic. Yeah, to go from one firm to the other. But if you go to speak to these people, they will provide you with as much information as possible. If you need some extra information on money, I can actually forward it to you afterwards. Just give me an email. Gotcha.
What's the investment process like? How do you actually make the investment?
So the thing is, what they do is they put the money in, they invest in government bonds on your behalf. Then, I can speak for Aaron because that's what I use. They invest in the money for you. So every day your money makes money for you, and it's compounded every quarter. So every 3 months they compound it and add to your original investment and continue with it.
And when you actually make, the investment, is it like phone call or is it?
I prefer face to face because I can then ask as many questions to them. But sometimes they can say that. But if it's a quick question, or you can call them on the phone. If you have one near you, I'd advise going face to face.
You have like the online portal you can log into to like view more information about the company, the investment, the fund you're involved in, you know, what's historical performance looking like, all that kind of stuff. You have all that information is basically available to you online when you invest with the company.
But when do you think you reach a stage to make risky investments? Because I know people who invest, but they're liquid enough to invest. Do you understand?
Again, this would depend on your risk tolerance, but also your age. So people that are roughly our age, between the ages of 20 to 30, we have age on our side. So we can afford to weigh out the volatility in the risky investments. So it's actually advised that we go towards more risky investment. There's no exact answer as to when exactly you should begin to invest in risky investment. It just depends on your personal preference. If you're a conservative person, like my brother there, there's probably never going to be a time when you're going to be like, oh, yeah, let's start taking risks. You know, it just depends on your personal preference.
Yeah, I mean, by the end of the day, so at a certain age, like rent doesn't even exist to you, and then rent exists, and all of a sudden there's like school fees in there as well, and you know,
you might want to be conservative. It just again depends on your person.
What do you think about Bitcoin?
I think it's interesting you asked that because I'm just beginning to fully get involved in it because I didn't really care for it much. He's the expert on cryptocurrency here. But for Bitcoin, I think my basic, for saying them online, only invest in Bitcoin what you can afford to lose. Because it's very risky. If you can't afford to lose the money, don't put your savings, your life savings there. Right? You know what I'm saying? So like you genuinely will. But if you can afford to lose a little bit of money, whatever that amount is, try it out just to see and capitalize on the bubble. It is a bubble, so it's coming down.
So I can talk to you about my personal strategy.
Yeah.
So I'm more long in Ethereum than Bitcoin. But I do believe like the Bitcoin value is going to force you. So if you want to make short-term profit, then it's something that okay, buy like I don't know, like 10,000 naira or whatever today. Once that money doubles, take out your principal, live out your profit, and just keep that process going. But again, if you're happy to lose that money, any moment now that bubble is gonna collapse. So.
But I mean, they want Bitcoin to actually become a proper currency, don't they?
Yeah,
so when that comes, you're stable.
Yeah, but that's. I mean, I think it has more use as a store of value than an actual currency. So I mean, like, yeah, I don't see. In Nigeria, anyway, no one would accept Bitcoin. Like, no one's going to accept Bitcoin. So,
it's all speculation at this point. But in South Korea, they use Bitcoin at ATMs and shops and online and all of that.
And if you want to know more about Bitcoin currency, so Bode Enrojan is like a blockchain developer. So, like, he will explain the mechanics of everything to you. So, yeah, that's the guy. That's why I left it.
NAV, that's net asset value. So it's basically the value of depending on. So the thing is that would be clarified. This is technical. The thing is that would be broken down to you in terms of actual amounts when you speak to your investment manager. Does anybody have any? No, nothing else. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, they'll send it. Sorry, let's try.
Oh yeah, So on the website, they said, oh, next day,
You see it, people have the video. Yeah, everything.
Alright guys, so I'm going to be talking about the 3 habits of highly productive people, and so to kick off this talk, I'm going to start off with a story about a flight. Basically, the flight is Qantas Flight 32. And Qantas Flight 32 was a flight that took off from Singapore on the way to Sydney, Australia, and it was in an Airbus. So an Airbus is basically those really big airplanes you've probably been in if you've gone across the Atlantic to different continent as well. So everything went to plan, right? The plane goes down the runway, it takes off 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet. Then about 7,400 feet up, the entire crew and the 440 passengers on board hear an explosion outside the aircraft. So they're thinking, did we just hit something? Did something hit us? Did an engine explode? And basically what happened was this. So this is the second engine of the aircraft in the title. So this is engine number 2. So engine number 2 basically caught fire and exploded. And what was interesting was the blade within engine number 2 actually shot out, hit through the left wing of the aircraft and penetrated another engine. So engine number 1 and 4 stopped working. Engine number 2 is on fire. And then you've got out of 14 systems to actually run the aircraft, 11 of them stopped working. The entire left-hand side of the plane, the electricity is gone. 50% hydraulic system, for those of you who are into that kind of stuff, was gone as well. The 30% of braking efficiency was gone. The control system, everything was basically just not working. And for a pilot in the cockpit, they had a dashboard with emergencies. So they had all these lights that started coming on, red lights, right? And each time the co-pilot would try and solve one emergency, another 10 or 15 would show up. So you can relate to that in your life as well, where you have a to-do list of something you solve one thing, and before you know it, another load of new distractions and problems come in as well. So all of this is going on, and basically, the pilot, his name was Richard de Cremley, he'd had decades of his co-pilot and says, okay, how much runway do we have? Because he wanted to turn around and land back in Singapore, right? There's no point carrying on and everyone dies, right? So the co-pilot basically says to him, okay, look, this plane needs 3,900 meters of runway to land properly. But the Singapore runway was only 4,000. So the margin of error is 100, right? If he lands the plane too quickly, then it's going to explode and everyone dies. If he overshoots the runway, the plane is going to flip over, and that's also a problem as well. So in this really high tension situation, he has to stay extremely focused under pressure. The margin of error is really, really small. And so even with that, somehow he managed to navigate the team and make sure that the aircraft landed properly and stopped just 100 meters just before the end of the runway. And what's interesting about this particular situation, this particular scenario that happened was that even though 469 survivors basically came out of the plane and he was a hero, whatever, they basically ran through this simulation at least 200 times. They did it with like the best pilots, the best aeronautical engineers. Every single time the aircraft crashes and everyone dies in the aircraft. So what was it about this pilot, Richard de Cremier, or what is it about people who just are able to stay focused even when they're under pressure and there's a lot of distractions happening? Now, how can we apply the same habits so that whatever you're doing in your day-to-day life, you can actually be more productive? So the general outline I'm going to be talking about is the first habit, which is to create a vision of what you expect to see. So we'll be talking about psychological concepts behind what we call mental models. So that's basically a story created in your mind so that in real time, when you are facing a distraction, your subconscious mind is actually working. The second habit we're going to be talking about is designing your environment for good decisions. So people always talking about being motivated, staying motivated, but I'm going to be talking more about how you actually design your environment. That means anything that corresponds to your 5 senses so that you can actually stay consistent over the long run. The third habit I'm going to be talking about is creating choices, your own choices, so you have more autonomy. So again, a lot of self-motivation, people don't realize that a lot of times if you struggle with motivation, it's because you don't have enough choices around that particular task, and we're going to be talking about that as well. So the first habit, create a vision of what you expect to see. Basically, you want to create a worldview or story in your mind that helps you make sense of the world, that makes you more productive. So going back to the story of Richard de Cremier, the captain, the pilot, and the situation with the aircraft. Basically, before he had gone on the plane, all the pilots for the airways, they had to run at least 4 simulations every year. So by the time Richard had actually gone on the aircraft, he had gone through so many scenarios of what could happen, even more so than even being in the plane itself. So it's the same thing with you, right? Like if you can run through those scenarios of what can happen during the day, what the situations I can get distracted, you can prepare ahead of time. That's what building the mental model was. So he was building those mental models by consistently running through simulations of what could happen and how he would deal with the distractions as they were happening in real time. And what was interesting was he started to do the same thing with his crew as well. So he would say to his pilot, for instance, co-pilot would say, okay, if engine number 2 fails, what would you do? Or he said to another co-pilot, like, if I look up, if everyone is looking up, I want you to look down. If everyone's looking down, I want you to look up because we're going to make a mistake and I want you to be the one to see where the mistake is happening. So he was building this narrative, these mental models in their mind. What was actually interesting was when the plane was descending, a squealer alarm started to go off. It's a really loud alarm that typically they used to revive unconscious pilots in the aircraft. And Richard basically took his hands off the control of the aircraft and he just takes a deep breath, closes his eyes, and he starts to visualize that the Airbus was actually a Cessna. So if any of you know anything about aeronautical engineering, a Cessna is basically a toy compared to an Airbus, right? Like you see the difference in the size. It's a single engine airplane. It doesn't have as much of the complexities. It's very basic. All it needs is just the tires, the wings, just basic controls. And that was the first plane he actually learned to fly with. So he basically created this narrative in his mind, like, okay, I'm flying this Cessna, I'm flying this Cessna. He turns to his co-pilot and says, okay, ignore the alarm, because if it was a Cessna, this alarm would not be ringing, right? Let's just focus our attention on the basics. Forget about all the millions of emergencies we have to deal with, right? It's that focusing on what actually matters in real time and not worrying about all the distractions that are popping up in anything he was dealing with. And so as he was landing the aircraft, he did what he would do with Cessna. So he went the rear wheels of the aircraft hit the runway first, then he pushed the front forward, and then he pushed the equivalent of the brake pedal in the aircraft once. That's what you would do with the Cessna, right? You wouldn't typically always do that with Airbus. And so it was that way of thinking that helped him to actually stay extremely focused, because he trained his subconscious mind to focus on what was important in real time as it was happening. And that kind of goes to what behavioral psychology is. So we typically think people who are highly productive are not exposed to the same information overload as the rest of us. We think these people somehow are not exposed to distraction. But what this research actually shows is that they're exposed to the same or if not more as the rest of us. They just have a way of training their mind to avoid what is known as cognitive tunneling. So cognitive tunneling is when you are so focused on one thing, or you react to something that happens to you that you ignore everything else happening around you. So a good example is sometimes when I struggle with this is, say I'm working, I'm sending an email to my boss, right? And then your colleague comes to you and starts sharing this funny story or something about something that happened. Oh, guy, I did this, or I did that, right? And in that moment of not being proactive, where you direct your attention to, you go into a cognitive tunnel because you're reacting to something or a distraction that happens in real time, right? And in that moment, I'm in a much higher chance of actually typing something wrong in the email. I send it off to the boss, and then it's like, why did I do that? This is because I was in a cognitive tunnel, right? The same thing as if you've been driving and you focus, and then someone texts you. And then you react to the text, and then there could be a lorry coming at the same time. And then you sort of like, oh my God, you know, I almost died or whatever. That's an example of what a cognitive tunnel is. So basically, highly productive people train their minds ahead of time, like the example which is prevalent, so that they're able to avoid getting into these cognitive tunnels. So the best way you can do this is actually prepare your mind like every day. So instead of just having a list of things you want to do, you actually want to prepare, like create scenarios in your head of what you expect to see. So, okay, I'm going to go to this meeting and this person is going to come and talk about their relationship. This and this is going to happen and the boss is going to shout at me. You have what you expect to see based on what's happened in the past. You run those scenarios through your head and you plan how you're going to deal with the distractions, right? So if somehow your phone starts ringing while you're studying or something, you've already prepared ahead of mind, okay, this is how I'll deal with it. Just like the same situation with the pilots in the cockpit. They already had the scenarios, the mental models ready to deal with those situations. So I think they're going to be bringing worksheets for that as well. So the second habit is basically designing your environment for good decisions. So your environment is anything you can touch, you can see, it's anything your five senses can basically interact with. The idea is you want to make it easier to make good decisions and harder to make bad ones. So a lot of times we rely on willpower or motivation to get things done. And as I've said before, motivation isn't enough, especially in personal finance. You're going to need 5, 6, 10, 15, 20 years before you actually see the results of your savings or your investments. So motivation will make you feel good temporarily, like you listen to Eric Thomas or whoever it is you listen to on YouTube, but at the end of the day, to actually make long-term changes, you need to change your environment to make it easier. So to explain this, I'm thinking about the blue zone. So basically there was a longevity expert, his name is Dan Werner. He was commissioned by National Geographic to go across the world and basically look for the healthiest parts of the world. Like, what was it about people who lived till 100? Like, these are people who refuse to die, quote unquote, and no coronary disease, low levels of cancer, extremely healthy, right? And what he found during his research, by going through these different parts of the world, he found 5 parts of the world that were extremely healthy. They called them blue zones, right? And what was interesting is they found that it wasn't that they were consciously thinking of being healthy. was that their environment was actually perfectly designed to make healthy decisions effortless. So, for example, you think about Sardinia in Italy. This is one of the blue zone regions, and so it's a mountainous region with an ocean. But because the port is difficult to send processed foods to, they don't have to deal with the issue of not eating processed foods. They don't have to deal with the issue of avoiding KFC or the typical chains we're worried about, right? Then also, because of that, they have to actually grow their own food, right? They have to grow in the garden. They have to grow organic food. They have to go fish, right? So they don't have to say, oh, I'm looking for organic food. They have to make the food they eat, right? Another example is you got this mountainous regions, right? So if I want to go to your house, there's no really a way for a car to drive. So I have to walk, and it's like hills, right? So just even through their daily interactions, it's already exercise, right? They don't have a gym membership. They don't have a diet plan. They don't think about these things because their environment actually makes it easy, just effortless to make healthy decisions. Another example is sometimes some of their buildings are vertical. Right? So let's say we're in this room and you want to go to that room will be in the next room. So you have to go up the staircase. But for the rest of us, it's like we hear physios and health experts like, oh, go up, use the staircase, right? But they don't have to think about that because the architecture makes it easy for them to do those kind of things. Also, another example is Okinawa in Japan. So you hear a lot of diet people, fitness, talking about reducing your calories and that kind of stuff. But what's interesting, because they're small plates, their place is so small, they actually prevents overeating. You show that reducing the size of your plate from 12.5 inches to 10 inches, serve yourself by 30%. So always thinking about, yeah, I want to eat less. Don't think about the environmental changes we can make that would actually make those decisions easier. And obviously the fact that they don't have to struggle with electronic devices that we all need. So there's no Facebook, there's nothing for them to do with. Another thing also in Okinawa in Japan is they go into rooms and there's no seats. There's nowhere for anyone to sit down. So typically, sometimes they just have to sit down on the floor, right? So again, experts always say, don't sit down for more than 30 minutes. It's not good for you. Stand up and stretch. Or if you sit down on the floor for 10 minutes, you have to stand up and walk around, right? And then another thing also you think about is some teams in some of these countries, if they want people to interact more, they would move seats from being horizontal and put it in a circle. Because by designing seats in a circle, people just naturally interact more with each other. So if you're ever working in a team and you want people to work closer and to communicate more, you can just actually design the way the seats are so it's more circular and they're actually facing each other. So let me give you more practical examples of highly successful people you know that how they design their environments for peak productivity. So for example, we'll talk about Richard Branson. In a lot of interviews, he's always talking about how the biggest environmental shift for him was that he actually carries around a physical notebook. That was how he came up with Virgin. So he was walking around and he had the idea of Virgin and he wrote it down on a piece of paper. He's actually attributed this to Virgin and all the 200 plus companies under Virgin. It's just the mere fact that he carries around a physical notebook. It makes sense because think back to the whole topic of mental model. He's continuously writing these things down. He's continuously creating these narratives in real time as they come into his mind. And then on top of that, he has the physical environmental. He's made that physical environmental decision to carry a notebook so that when he does have ideas, he can write them down. So it is possible that we've had Virgin type ideas cross our minds, but because our environment hasn't been designed to capitalize on our creativity, then the idea just disappears, right? So this is another example of environmental design. Another thing Richard Branson does is that he has standing meetings, so he doesn't have sit-down meetings. So how many of you have been in meetings where you sit down and it's supposed to be 10 minutes and it ends up being an hour? Like put your hands up, that's how. Yeah, exactly. That happens all the time. It's annoying. It's not productive. So what Richard Branson does is he takes away the chairs, right? And now all of a sudden the meeting gets done in 10, 15 minutes because it's uncomfortable standing there, or instead of sitting down and rambling about how your weekend was or stuff. Another example is Mark Zuckerberg. So when you look at his wardrobe, it's typically just gray hoodie, black shirt, very, very, very basic stuff. And it's the same thing with Obama as well. And Zuckerberg in an interview actually said that he does that deliberately so that he makes less decisions early in the day. The reason why that's interesting is because research actually shows that willpower is a muscle. So it actually depletes throughout the day. So the mistake we always make is we make majority of decisions early in the day and we waste our willpower. So later in the day when we actually need willpower to be productive, to resist procrastination, we don't have enough willpower left, right? So that's this idea of how highly productive people have a way of matching their peak energy levels in a productive environment. So with me, for instance, I know that my most energy is between 10 and 1 p.m. I protect that time like crazy because if I miss that window and I try and do my most productive things at 3 p.m., I'm just not going to have willpower to resist somebody messaging me and sending me a funny video. Like, yeah, I'll check that out. You know? That's what typically happens. So I think that basically figuring out when they work best, when they have the most energy, and then matching that with their most productive task that they have to achieve. That's why you have people who just work 2 hours a day and get more done than people who have 8 hours to work every day. So that brings us to this quote here from Tony Robbins. So basically, effective leaders have the ability to consistently move themselves and others to action because they understand the invisible forces that shape us. And one of the invisible forces is environmental design. So I think this is kind of cut out the slide, but yeah, I'll just read what that says. So the first step is we want to increase the number of steps required to make a bad decision. So an example is, I was trying to be healthy for a long period. I'm still trying to be healthy, trying my best. But I would buy basically a Toblerone chocolate. So I'll say, okay, I'm gonna be healthy throughout the whole week. On Saturday, I'm going to reward myself. I'll buy the chocolate on Sunday, right? So the idea is keep it in the house, don't touch it on Saturday, right? That doesn't happen. Okay? I come back from work on Tuesday, I'm stressed. Okay? I'm like, man, I'm going to finish this Toblerone right now. So I end up finishing the entire packet of Toblerone, right? So what I decided to do was to find a way to design my environment so I could increase the number of steps required to make a bad decision. So what I actually did was, I basically found the highest point in one of the highest covers in my house, and I basically needed a ladder to get to that point, and I threw the Toblerone there, right? And then on Wednesday, when I was really stressed out and I wanted to go and eat the Toblerone, it wasn't instantaneous. I had 5 minutes to think. I was like, okay, I'm not going to make that decision because I increased the number of steps required to make a bad decision. Another example is if you struggle always being on social media, what you can do is actually log out every time you use it, because now you've got an extra step required to log in and then use it. You buy yourself that extra time so that you don't have to just instantaneously just go into the distraction. The second step is reducing the number of steps required to make a good decision easier. So a lot of times, say for instance, you buy an apple and you want to be healthy, right? What do we typically do? We go and we put it in the fridge. Well, that's not an environmental decision that helps you because you can't even see it, which is why a lot of times we have a lot of healthy food in our fridge that we don't touch the whole week, right? So what you could do is actually have a bowl of apples in the middle of your kitchen table, right? Now, all of a sudden, anytime you walk into the kitchen, because it's there and you can see it, you would have a higher probability of actually picking an apple, just eating it because it's a fun. So I think this particular is in the worksheet. You can work over that based on. Which brings me to the third and final habit. It's basically creating your own choices. You want to make choices that make you feel in control. And to illustrate this, I'd like to share a story about a nursing home. So basically, researchers were looking at nursing home patients, and in a nursing home, you don't have any choices. Basically, they tell you where to eat, they tell you where to sit down, they tell you what your hours are. So they take your autonomy from you completely. You don't have any freedom of choice. And so it was interesting because they were watching patients. They would go, they would put their tray in the canteen, and they would get served food, and they would go and sit down. But what was interesting was that patients started to trade food with each other. And they were like, okay, what's going on here? There was one particular guy who traded his chocolate cake. He had told the researchers before that he loves chocolate cake. So they said, okay, why would you do that? Why are you trading the food? What the guy said was interesting. He said, I'd rather eat food that I hate, that I've chosen, than to eat food that I like, that's been chosen for me. This intrinsic human need for freedom of choice to have self-motivation to do something. And it's interesting that the patients that rebelled and exercised this control actually ended up living longer in the nursing homes. They ended up making better relationships. They ended up actually being more productive because they had more choice, and that choice gave them more self-motivation. So if you lack motivation to do a task, it's probably because you don't have enough autonomy around it. So we typically think of things that you're currently struggling to be motivated with. Like if you just think about it, chance that you don't have freedom of choice. So you could be in the job you hate, right? Is it that you hate the job, or you hate the fact that your boss basically controls everything and they tell you exactly what to do and when to do it, where to work? But if you had more freedom to choose the projects you want to work, you might actually start enjoying your job. So more examples of this. So for example, when I used to work on research papers in reinsurance, they would always tell us, okay, you have to start with the introduction and typically how the flow of the paper should be. So I started to just be extremely unproductive. I was bored. I was like, there has to be another way around this. So I started to experiment with actually rebelling against the routine. I said, okay, I'm going to start writing conclusions first, right? I'm writing conclusion or writing in the middle of the research paper. And that actually helped me to stay motivated and get more research papers done. Another thing that I do is that typically you get a book and you expect it to read the book from the beginning all the way through. Well, it's not really being productive given that we want to be selective about the information we take in and being practical about applying that information. So what I do is I look at the table of contents, I look at the information I need in that moment in time. I just go straight there, take out what I need, and actually apply in my life, and come back to the book for any other sections I need in later on periods. So this is another way of me exercising choice, so I can actually get more done. Another example is, say, if you always get bombarded by emails. Now the expectation is you're supposed to reply the email straight away. You can actually exercise choice by drafting a sentence to reply the email, and then come back later to reply the email at your own time. So you're not just reacting to people just saying, here's an email, here's a text, reply me now. You're exercising that choice to actually do it at your own time as well. A great way to exercise choices with to-do lists. Typically with to-do lists, we're told that it has to be a certain way. So what research has found is that a lot of tasks in your to-do list is actually a coping mechanism. You're doing it because you want to feel good, just the same way you would do likes on Facebook or likes on Instagram, because it's a coping mechanism to feel good. So what researchers actually suggest is that at the top of your to-do list, you want to have what they call stretch goal. Or stretch vision is basically your long-term vision is currently outside your reality. So I want to set up a business in 5 continents, or whatever the case is, that's a stretch vision. And then underneath that, you want to have smaller goals that feed that stretch vision. And then your to-do list basically are strategically selected plans or steps that support your stretch vision and your smaller goals. So you go from just having a bunch of tasks in your to-do list that you cross off, it makes you feel good, to actually having a bunch of stuff on your to-do list that's strategically helping you to achieve your goals. So productivity is a conscious decision to build habits of, number one, thinking deeply about what you expect to see in the future. Number 2, designing your environment for good decisions. And number 3, creating choices that give you more control. So which brings me to my final point. What exactly is the formula to success? So this is a quote by R. Nightingale. If you spend an extra hour each day of studying your chosen field, you'll be a national expert in that field in 5 years or less. That speaks to this idea of small improvements building up over time. Small savings here and there, every single week that build up over time to actually give you the results that you want to get. So here's an example. So I launched my website, mayoroshin.com, where I share behavioral psychology for productivity and habits. I launched it in February. Now, I didn't write my first article till June. And this is my subscriber growth. This is the number of people who subscribe to follow my work. So you see from February to June, there's not much going on because I was extremely inconsistent. Between June and July, I decided to write one article a month. Yet you still see that there's not much growth. Not because I wasn't writing the best articles, just because I wasn't being consistent. Around July, I basically made a decision that I would write 1 or 2 articles every week. You can see from that point, my subscribers have been going up, and I've seen the same thing with the social media as well. It's not that I write the best articles, it's not that I'm the best writer, the best researcher. It's simply because I'm just consistent. I had a plan in place, and I made a decision to stay consistent. So you can think about your life and the things you want to achieve. Just think about how can I make those consistent daily decisions so that I can achieve growth over time, naturally. So small changes lead to massive improvements over time. A lot of times we're just so focused on the goal. So I want to lose 50 pounds in the next 2 months, right? Well, the truth is, if you can just create a focus on the system, which is the system is every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'm going to show up in the gym at 7 p.m. and I'm going to work out for 30 minutes. If you focus on that system, just maintain that consistency with that system, the byproduct of the 50 pounds will happen. But typically, we're just so focused on the goal that we forget about the system. So it's about creating systems that help you to stay consistent with what you're trying to achieve. Another example is 3 years ago, I was writing a book for students to help them to improve their grades. And I was just paralyzed, right? I wanted the book to be perfect. I didn't want people to criticize me. So I literally open my laptop and I'll try and write and I'll just be paralyzed. I close my laptop. And this happened for 4 or 5 months, right? And one day I just said, okay, you know what? Let me just think of this as a journal, because I used to journal a lot of the time. And just like Richard in the example of thinking of the Airbuses and Cessna, I was thinking as, okay, forget about the book, think about this as a journal. And so when I did that, I took the first step and I just said, okay, I'm just going to write a sentence, right? When I wrote that sentence, it was like, just a lot of pressure just came off of me. And I was able to write on the next one. And within 4 weeks, I'd written 50,000 word draft, right? Within 6 months, the book was published in the market. That's an example of basically taking those small steps to basically build up over time. Right? Using a mental model that supports what you want to achieve so that you can actually be productive. I think if there's anything to summarize this concept of consistency, is that it speaks to our generation, this need for instant gratification. It's quick, lose weight quick, make money quick, everything is quick. But the truth is, if you be patient, then the consistency will begin to show the results in time. It doesn't have to be this year. It doesn't have to be when your friends get success that you have to get success. Your time will come if you just simply stay consistent. So my final point is that identity drives habits. Your actions will never exceed your self-image. So this is what researchers have found. People who make a lot of money quickly, they win the lottery, they become athletes, or they lose a lot of weight quickly, they gain it back, they gain back all the weight back over time, they also lose the money as well. The reason for that is because they never had the identity to support those habits. They never built the self-identity that would correspond with those habits as well. So simply be the type of person who does the actions as if it's already achieved the goal. So if you want to become good at personal finance, then be that type of person. Begin to take actions as if you've already achieved that goal. If you want to lose weight, then be a healthy person. Behave like someone who's already achieved the goal. Start to take action so that you can build that self-identity. When your identity actually matches your habits, consistency is something you do because it's who you are. It's not something you do because you're forced to. A healthy person doesn't work out because they read something in a book. They do it because it's who they are. And so, basically, in conclusion, with the theme of this entire talk and the seminar is take control of your life. And this is a quote I basically wrote down. And controlling your life is not about forcing things to happen. Controlling your life is not about making things happen quickly. What it's about is simply the daily decision of saying no to distractions, yes to practice, even when you don't feel like it. So that's all it takes to make 2018 the most productive year of your life.
Right, thank you very much. Okay, because I'm sure you guys are getting a little hungry. I think it's so great.
You want to do Q&A?
Yeah, also, I'm sorry. Q&A. We do Q&A, but after that, short break. So you guys can look away and talk.
Anyone any questions?
So, where can we find your book?
Yeah.
When's the next one?
Probably at some point this year. So it covers like the whole psychology of how to build habits, right? There's no point in learning about knowledge you can't apply it. So I basically put together the best stuff from psychology, so you guys can download that. But I'll probably do more next year, more like people are interested in creativity, right? How can you have a creative idea? So I'll do more of that. This for now, this is this one. Yeah.
Don't you feel that when you're about to do something great, there's increased distractions and things trying to pull you back? So would you just starve yourself from distractions totally?
That's what the, especially the first part of the talk is about this idea. We have this myth that productive people they're not exposed, right? I'm sure if you imagine a top CEO, he's bombarded by people who are looking for his attention. There's actually interesting, I don't know if you've heard of Warren Buffett. He has a two-list system, right? Where he basically forces his team and himself to narrow down to only 2 things they have to do every day. So basically, it's not so much about the distractions you have, but also about prepping your mind so that you focus on the 80-20 principle, right? The 20% that produces the 80. But you're right, the more you go up, the more distractions come. And it's about that focus. And I think that's why the mental models are useful. A lot of times we rely on willpower to do that. But if you can train your subconscious mind to do it for you, you don't have to waste as much time.
Just with that as well, if you set your vision, you have the distractions coming in,
then it's
if you have the goal, are these distractions worth me missing my target? That as well helps.
You have a question?
Good question. I'm a big believer in the consistency point. I really think that helps. But in places like Nigeria, where there is a lot of humans, like they actually evolve as you go along. I don't know. That was my biggest thing moving back to Nigeria. Getting that consistency when you're in a place where, like, to plan, for example, like we've gone on planning, we both talked about it. In Nigeria, I find contingency planning actually takes a lot of action. But like everything you plan, I put everything is like down on paper. Like when the first hit comes, Nigeria, it like throws everything out of back. So practically, how would you take all these steps you said off the paper, off your book? I don't know if like what long periods of time exactly. What would you advise? Like getting these off the book, off like paper, practical.
Yeah, because it's interesting, right? Like we can plan scenarios, but Nigeria is not that kind of environment where you can things are moving, right? And I don't know if any of you like sports analogies, right? The best coaches are the ones who are able to adapt during the game. So it's like, yeah, we want to prepare ahead of time, but how quickly can you pivot when things don't go your way? You have a meeting at 10, you expected 30 minutes of traffic and traffic to 2 hours. Like how? So it's basically training the mind also, I think, in real time. So there's 3 aspects of it. Obviously, there's a prep work where you kind of ahead of time you're anticipating what's going to happen. And there's also in the moment, right? Because with the Richard example, he basically ran out of scenarios, right? He was in a situation where all the emergency situations he prepared for, he got. So he had to create something in that moment as it was happening. So I think part of it is also when things don't go to plan, is how quickly in that moment can you actually create new narrative, right? New something to change the situation. You see where athletes are running around the track and they fall down. They have to think of something quickly to get back up and hope that they can win the race. So otherwise, it's game over at that point.
To reiterate what he said, I had a one-on-one with one of my guys last year. She was a gunner, and I said to her, you have to be positive when you come into work. She's like, boss, don't compare this to London, and told me the story about how some guy knocked her wing mirror. And when she said, oh God, what are you doing? The guy was like, well, I can't pass that. So she's like, you don't have that, You don't have those issues in other countries, whereas in Nigeria, you might leave your house and face, like you say, 3 hours of traffic. What do you do against that?
Yeah. How do you, in that moment, how do you?
Learn is human.
Yeah. Good. Cool. So if you guys have any other questions, ask me. After lunch now. So, okay. Lunch?
Okay. Yes, yes, we're having chocolate, please. Just so that you guys can. Then afterwards we'll come back and have the next week. Some more. Let's make some curry and stuff. So, are we good? So, we say this